Ablaze. Shade circled anxiously over the peak of Tree Haven with Frida and Mercury, watching the owls soar toward them. They flew high up in the sky, 35, maybe 40, in an arrowhead formation, and the eerie silence of their powerful wing beats made Shade feel sick. Clutched to their claws were long, thin sticks, the ends glittering like dangerous stars. Fire. Shade stared in horror. Only the owls had fire. Hundreds of years ago they'd stolen some from the humans and kept it burning in secret nests deep in the forest. Mercury, Frida said with amazing calm, go spread the news through the forest and tell everyone to take cover there. Tell them there's to be no fighting. Shade, go back inside and make sure everyone is out of the roost. He swallowed hard. Do you understand? Frida asked him. Yes. You know what might happen. He nodded fiercely and flew off, grateful to have something to do. He dove back inside Tree Haven, crying out the warning. Clear the roost! Clear the roost! He poured all his energy into his task, trying not to think of the fire in the owl's claws. He started at the bottom and worked his way up, darting through every twist and turn of the branches to make sure he didn't miss anyone. Clear the roost! Everyone out! And all this because of him, his fault. Lucky that almost everyone was out hunting. The bats still inside were old and frail, and he had to nudge some of them awake and help them toward the exits, explaining hurriedly. His fur was beaded with sweat when he flew back outside to join Frida. Everyone's out, he panted. Good, said Frida, staring up at the owls. They were still high in the air, but directly overhead now, circling. One owl detached himself from the group and began a slow descent. He was, Shade noticed, the only one who carried no fire in his claws. Go now, Frida told him, and take cover in the forest with the others. What are you going to do? Talk to the owl. Shade hesitated. He wanted to stay. He wanted to help. The old bat against these flying giants? Maybe I should go, Frida snapped, flaring her wings and baring surprisingly sharp teeth. Shade went, but not far, only to the nearest tree. He sank his claws into the bark and hung upside down, looking back at Frida and the huge owl, now settling beside her on Tree Haven's peak. Brutus, Frida said with a respectful nod. Frida Silverwing, came the owl's reply, so deep it was like a roll of thunder. You've brought soldiers and fire, Brutus. Why? You know why. We've come for the bat who saw the sun. Shade felt the owl's words shudder in his bones, and he held his breath, waiting for Frida's reply. She looked so small beside the owl. You cannot make war on us at night, Brutus. That is the law. Shade was aware that other Silverwings around him in the nearby tree, hanging behind leaves, hunched up on branches, pressing themselves into the bark. Hundreds of dark eyes, fearful and intent, watched Frida and Brutus. The law has already been broken, Brutus said. We're here for justice. I ask you again, and it will be the last time. Give us the boy. Shade felt his insides liquefy. The boy is only a newborn, and he didn't know any better, Frida said. Surely you can overlook his foolishness this once. The law makes no exceptions. Let the owls take him. It was Bathsheba, flying out from the forest and landing beside Frida. Brutus is right. The law has been broken, and the boy must pay the price. Shade could sense the eyes of the other bats on him now, and he burned under their gaze as if caught up in the sun's glare. Did they want him to give himself up? He wondered, a sick gnawing in his stomach. Was that it? You know I am right, Frida, Bathsheba continued. One life pays for the law and protects us all. Where is the boy? Shade cast a hopeful net of sound and caught the telltale outline of his mother's upside-down face and shoulders. She turned toward him, and their eyes met through the weave of branches of leaves. He'd never felt so alone. He looked back at the owls. He knew what they would do if he didn't surrender. All the other bats thought he was a runt, a troublemaker, and now they would think he was a coward. It was his fault. What choice did he have? He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, tensed and prepared to take flight. Jaws clamped firmly around his rear legs, pulling him back, and he tumbled against Ariel's warm fur. "Don't you dare!" she hissed fiercely. He hadn't even heard her land. "They've got fire," he said. "If I don't do it, they can take me instead." Shade shook his head in mute horror, and finally realized what danger they were in. The owls wanted a sacrifice, and the thought that it might be his mother, it was too terrifying. The idea of losing her forever, just like his father. He lunged toward her, digging his claws into her. "Don't," he whispered fiercely. "No." It was Frida's voice from the summit of Tree Haven, and both Shade and his mother turned to look. The elder's wings were spread wide in anger, and she was rising up on her rear claws, teeth bared not at Brutus, but at Bathsheba. "You forget yourself," she scolded the other bat. "Until I die, I am the chief elder, not you. I am the colony's voice, so hear it now. No one will take the boy, or anyone else." She turned to Brutus. "That is my final reply to you." The owl's huge eyes hooded. "Your choice is unwise." He beat his wings and lifted from Tree Haven, swiveled his neck, and shrieked up to his fellow owls in a language Shade could not understand. Then, as Brutus flew higher, he shouted back at Frida, "You've made your reply. Here is ours." With a terrible shriek, 40 owls plunged towards Tree Haven, fire burning in their claws. Shade saw Frida and Bathsheba fling themselves clear as the owls hurled their fire sticks at the tree, flames leaping back as they struck bark. "It can't burn," Shade thought desperately. "It's been hit by lightning, and it can't burn again." But it did. Sparks caught on the tree's blackened armor, along the branches, up the trunk. He had to stop it. Before his mother could hold him back, he flung himself into the air and plunged towards the growing patch of flame. He batted it out with spread wings again and again until it sputtered out. He could do this. He could put out the fires and save Tree Haven. He looked around frantically and launched himself at another fire. From the corner of his eye, he saw his mother and dozens of other bats surge from their hiding places in the forest and soar toward their beloved roost. His heart leaped. "Put out the flames," came the cry. "Stop the fire!" But the owls were waiting for them. They beat them back with their wings as effortlessly as if they were drops of rain. They didn't attack with their claws. Their objective was only to keep the bats from the tree. Only a few made it through to fight the flames. Shade finished smothering another small flame, banked around the thick trunk, and nearly hit an owl. He veered away just in time. The owl hadn't even noticed him. The giant bird was hovering, pumping his wings, looking for something, looking for an entrance. There was fire in his claws. The owl found the knothole, too small for him to enter, but with a jolt, Shade understood. The owl flew to the knothole and began pushing his fire stick through. A terrible anger took hold of Shade, filling his head with black. He hurled himself at the burning stick, seizing it with his claws and teeth and trying to wrench it away from the owl. But it was no use. The owl twitched one wing and knocked Shade against the trunk. He was aware of falling into darkness, then a surprisingly gentle thud, and it was only intense heat that brought him around. He opened his eyes and lurched back from the burning moss at the tree's base. He smacked the fire with singed wings, but it didn't die. The flames grew larger, hungrier, spitting sparks which caught in his fur and burned his flesh. "Shade, stop!" It was his mother pulling him back. "I've got to." "You can't put it out." Still he struggled, even as she dragged him away through the pall of smoke and up into the air. He knew she was right. Tree Haven was a pillar of fire, and from the knotholes, those entrances he'd always thought were so secret and safe, shot sharp tongues of flame. Tree Haven was burning inside and out. Bark crackled, ancient wood gasped. There would be no stopping it. The owls were gone. His body aching, Shade joined the listless throng of bats in the treetops. He wished he were blind, so he didn't have to see their faces, the looks of shock and anger, or the way the mothers pulled their wings tighter around their children, as if he might somehow hurt them just by looking at them. He stared numb with disbelief and exhaustion as the flames and thick smoke rose from their doomed home, All his fiery anger seeped out of him and was replaced by a slow, cold fury. This is what the owls did. They killed my father, and now they destroyed my home. Our home. We're lucky you didn't lose a wing, Ariel said beside him. He grunted, not caring. He noticed that the other bats were moving away from them, shuffling to other branches, fluttering silently to other trees. Hadn't they seen him fighting the fire? He'd done his best to stop it. Silverwings! It was Frida flying above them. We must strike out for Stonehold. If we start now, we can make half the distance before dawn and find temporary roosts along the way. You have betrayed us, Frida, cried Bathsheba, rising into the air and circling angrily. Look at the ruins of our home. Silverwings, do you still choose Frida as your leader, the great leader who has let your home burn to the ground? Speak! There were ragged mutterings of discontent through the crowd, though no voice was raised loud enough to stand out. My power is only good as long as you give it to me, Frida told them. But let me say this. We have suffered a terrible loss tonight. We have lost Treehaven, our nursery roost for hundreds of years, but no one was killed. We have not lost a single member of our colony. So I say this to you. We can replace our roost, but Ariel could not have replaced her son. All you mothers who would have offered their child in exchange for the Treehaven? Who? A miserable silence hung over the assembled bats. If I have made the wrong choice, tell me now. But as long as I am chief elder, I will never bargain a life, no matter how terrible the consequences. One life is more important than any roost. You have reason to be angry. Vent your anger at the owls who did this, not one of your own. Speak, anyone who thinks otherwise. Shade waited in agony as the silence stretched out. We have a long journey before us, Frida said, to Stonehold to join with the males, and then on to Hibernaculum. Slowly, but with grim determination, every bat of the Silverwing colony rose into the air, all the newborns and their mothers, the old and the young. Frida took the lead with the other elders. She sang as she flew, a high, piercing note to blaze her trail. Shade flew alongside his mother. Never had he known the colony to be so gloomily quiet. He'd spent so much time anticipating the moment they would leave for Hibernaculum that it had both frightened and excited him. But now he felt deadened, just concentrated on pumping his wings. Flight was a joyless thing to him. He couldn't stop himself from looking back until all he could see was the glow of the flames and the smudge of the smoke's thicker darkness against the night. By dawn, long after the Silverwings had left, the Treehaven was still burning. The great branches snapped and exploded, until finally the tree toppled, heaving its roots up out of the earth and stone, and laying open the cave beneath. And if any bat had been within 1,000 wing beats, he would have heard 1,000,000 faint voices streaming up from the echo chamber, their stories released at last and lost forever in the sky. They found a deserted barn before sunrise. The rafters sagged, the roof and walls let in dusty shafts of daylight, and the smell of beasts and their droppings was still unpleasantly strong, but it seemed safe and free of birds' nests. Hanging from the high rotting beams, exhausted, most of the bats plunged immediately into a deep sleep. Shade pressed close to his mother, his breastbone still aching from the long flight, and whenever he shut his eyes he saw Treehaven burning. Ariel shifted and looked at him. "It's not your fault," she said softly. "No one's ever going to talk to me the rest of my life. They'll get over it. They saw how brave you were. You tried to save the roost, which is more than most of the others. I'm very proud of you." Shade glowed silently with her praise. "Frida took me to the echo chamber," he told her. "It already seemed like such a long time ago." After a brief pause, his mother said, "And what did you hear?" "The old stories, the great battle of the birds and the beasts. I heard about the promise, too. Not many bats pay attention to those stories nowadays. My father did, though, didn't he? I suppose Frida told you." There was annoyance in her voice, and then she gave a small, resigned sigh. "She has her reasons, I'm sure, but all I know is that wanting to see the sun gets bats killed. Maybe the stories are true. Who knows? Maybe once we flew in the light of day and didn't fear any creature, but now we live in the night, and we've lived in the night for millions of years, And is it really so bad? It's certainly not worth dying for.